Most of my life I thought fear was protecting me. My name is Arthur, and I'm 88 years old, and only recently have I begun to understand that the things I feared the most were never the things that truly mattered. When you live as long as I have, you start to see patterns in your own life that were invisible while you were living them. At the time, everything feels justified. Every decision has a reason. Every hesitation feels like caution, like wisdom even. I used to tell myself I was being careful, that I was thinking ahead, that I was avoiding mistakes other people made. But when I look back now, I don't see a careful man. I see a man who was afraid to step into his own life. I grew up in a small house with thin walls, and a father who believed that mistakes were something to be punished, not learned from. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, it stayed with you. I learned early that it was safer to stay quiet, safer to follow the path already laid out, safer not to take chances that might bring attention to yourself. By the time I was a young man, that lesson had settled deep inside me, so deep that I mistook it for part of who I was. There was a girl once, her name was Lillian. I still remember the way she used to laugh, like she wasn't afraid of being heard. She had this way of looking at the world as if it was something meant to be experienced, not avoided. We would walk together in the evenings, talking about things that felt too big for the small town we lived in. She wanted to leave, to see more, to become more, and I wanted that too, though I never said it out loud. She asked me once very plainly if I would come with her. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of an entirely different life. I remember standing there, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, that quiet voice telling me all the things that could go wrong. What if we failed? What if we had no money? What if I disappointed my family? What if I wasn't enough outside the life I already understood? So I told her no. Not because I didn't want to go, but because I was afraid of what would happen if I did. She left without me. For a long time I convinced myself I had made the responsible choice. I stayed, found steady work, married a kind woman, built what most people would call a good life, and in many ways it was. There was comfort in it, and stability, and moments of real happiness that I will never deny. But there was also something else, something quieter, something I didn't have the words for back then. It felt like a door I had closed and then forgotten how to open. Fear has a way of disguising itself. It doesn't always look like panic or weakness. Sometimes it looks like responsibility. Sometimes it sounds like logic. It tells you to wait, to be sure, to avoid unnecessary risk. And if you listen to it long enough, it becomes the voice you trust the most. I listened to that voice for decades. I didn't apply for opportunities that felt just out of reach. I didn't speak up when something mattered to me more than I was willing to admit. I avoided difficult conversations, thinking I was keeping the peace, when really I was just avoiding discomfort. Even in my marriage, there were things I felt but never fully expressed, not because they weren't important, but because I was afraid of what honesty might change. And life went on, the way it does. Years turned into decades. My children grew up and built lives of their own. My wife and I grew older together, sharing routines that felt familiar and safe. From the outside there was nothing missing, but inside there was always that quiet question I never quite faced. What would have happened if I had been less afraid? It wasn't a dramatic moment that made me realize all this. There was no sudden event that changed everything. It came slowly, the way most truths do, After my wife passed, the house became very quiet, quieter than I was prepared for, and in that silence there were no distractions left, no responsibilities to hide behind, just time and memory. I found myself thinking about Lillian again, about that moment when everything could have gone a different way. Not because I believed my life would have been perfect if I had gone with her, but because I finally understood what I had lost wasn't a person or a place. It was the version of myself I never allowed to exist. I had spent so many years afraid of failing, afraid of uncertainty, afraid of stepping outside what was expected of me, that I never stopped to consider what I was giving up in return. I was so focused on avoiding pain that I also avoided possibility. And the truth is, the things I feared most never came to pass. The disasters I imagined, the judgments I worried about, the failures I tried so hard to avoid, they were mostly just that, imagined. Meanwhile, the things that truly shaped my life were the quiet absences, the chances I didn't take, the words I didn't say, the risks I didn't allow myself to consider. It's a strange realization, coming this late. You spend your whole life thinking you're doing the right thing, only to see at the end that you were asking the wrong questions all along. If I could go back, I wouldn't try to make everything different. Life is more complicated than that, and there were good things, real things, that came from the choices I made. But I would change the way I listened to fear. I wouldn't let it be the loudest voice in the room. I would question it. I would challenge it. I would ask whether it was protecting me or simply keeping me small. At 88, there isn't much time left to rewrite anything, but there is time to understand, and maybe that matters in a different way. If you're listening to me now, wherever you are in your life, I hope you don't wait as long as I did to ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Not the surface answers, not the ones that sound reasonable, but the deeper ones, the ones that keep you from stepping forward, from speaking honestly, from choosing the life that feels uncertain but true. Because one day you may find yourself sitting in a quiet room with nothing but your memories, and you'll realize that fear was never the thing that deserved so much of your attention, and by then the only question left will be whether you were living your life or just carefully avoiding it.